Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another episode of Is My Aura on Straight? I am AC Brown, your psychic channel and spiritual guide. And in this episode, I talked to my friend Erin Rogers. Erin is phenomenal when it comes to astrocartography. If you haven't heard me talk about astrocartography, then yeah, we probably haven't many conversations, but I'm always talking about astrocartography and what that is and how astrocartography helps us live in certain places, be in certain places, and feel different energetics. And in this episode, Erin and I talk about the benefits of astrocartography. What are some of the lines that you should want to live on or even travel to, and how that makes a difference in your life. So check out this episode and make sure you share this video, like it, and subscribe to the channel. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Is My Aura on Straight? I'm your host, AC Brown. I'm your psychic channel and spiritual guide, and I want to thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Is My Aura on Straight? And today I have a special guest in the house, my friend Erin Rodgers, and the reason why this is such an going to be an amazing episode is because we are talking about astrocartography, and I am obsessed. I've been obsessed for years, and I won't go there about what's happening in my life, but we're going to tell you how astrocartography can help you. So welcome, Erin. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. We're just on the full moon, which has felt very impactful, which is always exciting. But otherwise, good. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. So first question, is your aura on straight?
Well, I just adjusted my camera to make sure it is. I think so. I mean, I'm clearing it every day. So I don't know. Any hot tips on how you check if your aura is on straight?
It's just a question.
Okay.
So no, you're fine. So let's just jump right into it. So let's talk about astrocartography. You are all about the energetics of astrocartography as well as human design, breath work, all of those things. Yeah. So tell everyone why astrocartography.
Sure. Astrocartography and also human design, for me, came into my life after I was a fixer, right? So I was like, well, this isn't quite working. If I could just figure out what to fix within myself, I'm going to enjoy my corporate life. I'm going to find the right partner, all the regular things. And astrocartography, as well as human design, said, no, you aren't meant to fit into that box that you're trying to make work. You came in just as you're intended to be. And some of the signals for me were I was born on my Neptune and close to my moon line. I've had the good fortune of living in different places in the world. I've lived on a different line everywhere I've moved before I found the system. And all of my experiences corresponded with the lines.
Wow.
And then same with human design. I realized that I was a highly intuitive channel, medium, and everything else. And it was like, oh, well, maybe being a corporate recruiter is the problem, not me not loving it as much as I think I should.
Okay, that makes sense. And so when you talk about astrocartography, and because the people who are like, what is that? What does that mean? What is the energetics of it? What does it mean to your lines and all of that stuff? What does that mean?
Yeah. So at the very base level, what I love is it is, if this is an audience that's familiar with human design, but it's, the moment you were born, the planets were in a certain configuration in the sky. And astrocartography basically captures those placements and overlays it on a world map so that you have physical places in this world that you can go and interact with or travel to, live on, or be born on, that will give you the energy of those planets, of let you connect with, understand, delve in more to your own personal energetics through what those planets have to teach you.
Awesome. So another question that I have so many questions. I have all them written down because I think this is important. And if you want to work with Erin,
I'll give you all that information on how to reach out to her. When you were, on this self-awareness journey and you had this kind of spiritual awakening, do you remember which line you were going from to where, like from this point to that point? Because you were in corporate America and then you were like, oh, something's not right or whatever. So what your corporate career, what line was that on? And can you talk about that?
Yeah. So most of my life was spent in Vancouver, Canada. I was born near there. And I was born under a Neptune line, which is very helpful for spiritual things, but it can be hard to see people clearly. So although like I couldn't work, my personal life, I had a hard time judging people well. I would very much the low end of Neptune descendant, which is where I was born, is like people that are just not truthful. It's sort of like the concept of seeing underwater and there's all those bubbles, so you can't see things clearly. So I would be like, I'll say duped by people where I was like, I thought you were this way and that, but you're really over here. And so Neptune for me was highly spiritual, but my personal life really suffered because I also wasn't clear with who I was myself. Versus, let's say, when I was younger, I lived in Australia and I lived on my Uranus line. And I was like, Uranus is all about change, innovation, that very Aquarian energy. So like I went there and my whole life changed. I never went back to the town where my parents were living in terms of like living there. I changed my whole life. I figured out who I was. I found my own identity. And same when I lived in France, it was another opportunity. I believe it's I'll have to pull it up. My moon's node, but just like figuring out who I was in my own path in life. And then I would travel a lot. So I would get out of the energy, but I always found Vancouver challenging because it would feel a little bit like I was underwater. And like if you live on your moon or Neptune line, your body can also just retain water as most of the moon energy, which I can literally see the physicality. I'm like, you really retain water here. I'm like, yeah, I know. And it's a wet place already, but down to even the physicality of how my body reacts to the location.
Oh, wow. So when you moved away from there the first time as an adult, like after the corporate kind of career, what was that kind of shock to the system and where did you first go? Like what line?
Well,
do you remember?
The problem was I stayed on the line. The line runs all the way down to Sedona, and I went to Sedona because I was in a car not the year before, 6 months before, and got hit by lightning in my car. So the irony is I keep being pulled back. So I lived in Sedona, I lived in Sayulita. They were all on that line. But like in LA, because I drove down, has my Neptune and my Venus line. And I definitely could feel that. Like my ability just to communicate and be received was just heightened there. Things go really well for me in LA, although I find it intense as a general,
as a city, right?
As a city. But yeah, my ability to, I mean, as simple as like get hit on is easy. Like LA, it just seems to happen. And I'm like, this shouldn't necessarily be true. So I can very much feel the difference as I move through. But the lines that you're born under are kind of, the concept is like they're in your backpack. They're always with you.
Okay.
So, and then some people aren't born on any lines, but mine are always, so that moon and Neptune are always kind of with me and they're mingling with the other lines. So in some ways there's no fully escaping it. Although if you get into the energetics of it, meaning you think about all those those planets as energies, I can work with it in that way and separate myself out.
No, that makes sense. And let's jump to that when you don't have a line in the place that you live or were born, because thinking about this interview, I wanted to talk about that energy because the energy is interesting because as you know, I'm not on a line where I currently live. I don't have any major influences and it feels very solid, but no progress. It's just like almost like the energy is very just existing.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a great way to describe it. So let's say, yeah, especially I find, and this is just my own like personal, is if you aren't defined with a sacral, I feel like you're just even that much more open, or if you have very few centers defined, like just the more openness in your chart, I feel like you can also feel into lines a lot more. So let's say you are where you are, and instead of moving to the 3 locations, maybe you're considering moving to, you first decide to bring the energies of those locations to you. So let's say one is on your, I'm trying to remember what they are. Is it like
Jupiter, yeah,
Saturn, Neptune?
Yeah, Neptune, and then the out west is Pluto and Jupiter.
Yeah. And so then I would say that potentially what you could do, and you can tell that I have a 3 and you have a 3 as well, is you could run an experiment. You could try each of them for 2 weeks and like consciously call that energy in from those locations. So you could do that.
Explain that more. Yeah. Explain that more for people who are like, well, I can't, my Jupiter line or my Venus line is in Mexico and I'm not going there. What do you mean by call that in?
So let's say it's in Mexico. Then you could consciously cook with spices from that part of Mexico. You could eat food from that part of Mexico. You could watch movies. You could connect with characters, whether it's a movie character or a book character from that area. You could read books, you could watch movies. I find music, but sound really impacts me. A really easy
So listening to music from there or artists. Interesting.
And then what I've created in the new course I built was going into the sound vibrations of the planets through meditation and some workbooks and other pieces of just being like, I'm just going to go straight to that planet through the vibrations, and vibration really works for me. So there's a lot of ways in which you can use all of this energy without ever going there. And you could even use crystals. So crystals that are associated with planets. Sound is associated with planets.
I love that. I love that.
And you can also use crystals and potentially sound as a counterbalance. So let's say you're going to go to your Pluto line and you're like, it's a bit intense. I would like to soften it.
And ground more. Right.
And maybe for you, the moon energy feels like the right softening. And I have a chart that people get in the course, but maybe you want to wear a moonstone to like lessen it. And really allow that moonstone to be activated on your body and almost let it be part of your auric field so that you're not like smack dab in the middle of death, rebirth, and transformation more so than you want to be.
So let's talk about that death, rebirth, and transformation. When we think about these lines, because I'm sure people listening to this, some of people are on really horrible lines, and not saying that something's good or bad, but what are some undesirable like planets to be on where you could see in your life it's showing up very quickly?
Yeah. So like you said, there is no good or bad. And like, I would say what I find so funny, like Scorpios tend to love Pluto. I'll be like,
that sounds familiar. That sounds right.
You know what I mean?
Like they would like just gravitate and like, yes, I want to be reborn all the time and challenging and deep and connection and all of that stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah. Where they actually tend to hate, this is very generic, but tend to hate their sun line because they don't want to be that well. They like to be in the shadows a little bit and have that control of that Scorpio. Like, here I am, I get to come in and come out, but I'm in control of it, versus like a Leo who's like, give me the sun, right?
Sun, right.
And for them, maybe Pluto feels harder because they're like, yeah, I'll get to that eventually, maybe. And so this is where you have to figure out for you personally, but like, as I'm a Sagittarius, I've got 5 planets in Sagittarius. I'm generally less keen on Saturn because I'm less keen on Capricorns.
Right.
This isn't fair.
Same here.
Yeah. And like both my parents are Capricorn. Like I've got lots of it in me. Right. And so I'm always like, it's really structured. And so for you, maybe Saturn feels really structured and rigid. And so for you, you want to invite more play and joy and sensuality in your life. So I would say, generally speaking, Chiron can be tough. Pluto
I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. Good Lord. What would that be like living on your Chiron line?
Yeah. So I would say people born on their Chiron line have the potentially toughest time because they have to go through that healing, their intense healing. It becomes their gift, but it just, whenever I've done readings for people on there, like that have been born on it, they're just a different level of human. It's just different. That's all I can describe it.
Well, yeah, you're going through so much like uphill, like you're going through a lot.
Yeah, it definitely can appear from the outside more difficult. So let's say you're going to go on like a healing retreat. So I like using the lines for things like retreats or hiring coaches. So you want to hire a transformational coach, see if the coach comes from your Pluto line. See if your healing coach comes from your Chiron line, because people can also bring those lines to you. Pluto, Chiron, Uranus, and then maybe Saturn, depending on who you are. So maybe the more like, I guess that's kind of more the outer planets in some ways, plus Saturn. But are you ready to look at your healing?
Right. So,
and if you're unknowingly pulled there, like, okay, I might not be ready.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because you can pull people into like from other places to have that energy based off of where they live.
Yeah. So typically, it's where they were born, generally speaking, they'll hold that energy. So let's say I look at your astrocartography chart and I look at where I was born, and the one I know that's true for sure is Alex and I are on each other's lines in a positive way. And so then maybe when people find me and are attracted to me, I tend to maybe be on a line that's associated with intuition or healing or transformation.
Okay. So, and just those who are watching or listening, we're talking about our friend Alex Cantone.
Yeah.
They're like, who the hell is Alex now?
Yeah. Miss Cantone. And so she's like, and she's born on a Jupiter line, and I'm Sagittarius. So even though our charts don't match up, there's a lot of similar energy I find from that, or at least understanding.
Okay, that makes sense. So what advice do you have for people who are not, so especially, and this is interesting because I think that, so say you're in a relationship, right? And you and your spouse live a certain place, or you and your partner, whatever, and you are in a great place astrocartography wise, and they're not.
Yeah.
How do you rectify that?
Yeah. So when I've had clients that have had this, I would, my personal recommendation is to lean into your partner's energy, to use their energy as so that you can access what they're experiencing there. So that's one. Two, if it's your partner and not you, it's a fine line between trusting that they're there for the transformation, the realization, the experience they need, and also needing to live with them. Like this woman I worked with,
because that could be
they were on her husband's Pluto line. So we did invite some like essential oils and some stones in just to create like within the house and with their atmosphere. They did eventually move. But so yeah, you can use, I forgot to mention earlier, essential oils can also be a really great thing just to have in the house or on your person. Consciously leaning in to the person that has a more positive placement, or just trusting that what seems difficult is perfectly placed, but then within your home, you can invite in complementary energies.
Okay. Now that goes the same for, say you want to move to your Jupiter line and it just doesn't make sense, or you want to move to your Venus line or things like that. Do you recommend people just going to visit a few times a year, etc., like to get that energy and like bring it back with them? Like, what's your recommendation there if you just literally can't move?
Yeah, if you literally can't move but can travel, definitely go try it out. Classic astrocartography books would say it takes 2 weeks for you to really feel the energy of a line.
Okay.
I've experienced it differently, although I would say that I tend to be energetically sensitive. So this is always like what's true for you. If you have a pretty open aura that's clean and healthy and is working well, it probably is responding to energies, and you can get that sense pretty quickly. So yeah, go to the line, see how it feels. Like, let's say you're someone who writes books. Let's say that's what you do. Then maybe twice a year you go to your Mercury line and you always do outlines, and like you get a core of it done that needs that like starting energy to like, oh, okay, I need the inspiration. And then when you're at home, your office space where you write or your computer has a photo background of where your Mercury line sits that you want to work with. Maybe it's Mercury on the MC, you have a bit of music playing, And that like brings that energy to you wherever you are to continue through, getting into the details of the book, for example.
Okay, I love that. So tell me about some of the more desirable planets that
Yeah.
really kind of propel. I don't even say propel, but people really notice a shift that is positive.
Sure. Again, highly personal. I'll tell you what people ask for the most often.
Of
Everyone,
course, yes. Everybody wants to know, where can I make the most money at? Probably.
No, everyone wants to know,
No?
do I have literally, at least everyone that comes to me, do I have a line in Paris? Do I have a line in Bali?
Really?
Oh, Paris is the number one. Which I'm always like, fair enough. I mean, I lived in France, so I'm like, maybe it's my energy, but Paris is like, so, but Paris, right? And I'm like, we must all pass through as souls through Paris because everyone has energy there. So there's a few physical locations on the planet that people tend to want to know about. And then it's usually Venus.
Really? That's the top line that people ask you about? Really?
Yes.
I mean,
where is my love line?
I mean, I want to be in love and stuff, but I don't, that's not a priority. Look at me. That's not a priority right now.
That's how we've ended up here, haven't we?
Right.
No. So for those listening that are like, yeah, Erin, I would like to know that, your Venus descendant is said to be your love line because that gives that loving energy, and descendant is what brings people towards us. But that said, you might love quirky, weird, eccentric people. Then Uranus on the descendant might be your version of love, but very heterotypical, I would say. Venus on the descendant is what you're looking for. Some texts would say that's to attract women, and some texts would say Mars on the descendant would be to attract men. Huge asterisks. Mars can be super aggressive, and it also can denote literally being physically attacked. So that is where all of this is always so personal to each person. That's why I always invite people to see what's true for them. But those would be the love lines. Obviously, Jupiter is expansive, especially for career and good luck. So you might want to look for Jupiter. If people want to be famous, want your fame line, Sun on the MC. Yeah, I don't know. Those are probably the most sort of common.
Okay. That's so Venus on the descendant, Jupiter, and then the Sun on the MC.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are good. Okay. I love that. So so we have some favorable stuff. We have some not favorable things. When I think it's really important, because since you're so knowledgeable, how did you get into this work? Like, you lived on so many lines, lived so many places. What was calling you to this?
Totally. So one, I will say, so funny, when I had my corporate job, people were like, follow your passion. And I was like, I'm not going to be an astrologer. Never mind. And I loved astrology, reading my aunt's book when I was 8. I realized later, I'm just obsessively reading it, but thinking nothing of it, kind of everyone wants to know their horoscope. And just for me personally, and maybe this was for human design for you and some other systems you work with, it's I just got it. I was like, yep, got it. It's so lame, but it just made sense. I've taken a few different courses from people at various levels of knowledge in astrology, like a top end astrologer, and then just read books. But I 3-5'd it.
Yeah.
I talked to people.
Little 3-5 bias over here. Any 3-5s listening, we're special. That's just what happens now.
My own learning style was eventually to be like, hey, what's your birth time? Let me tell you about. And when I'm excited to, I'm a generator. So I'm excited, I'm telling you. So the knowledge felt like it came naturally. The application when I took courses really made sense to me. And then for me, the interweaving with human design is why?
And how do you weave that together? What's your process of weaving astrocartography and human design?
So for me, in human design, the things I end up talking about the most are energetics in terms of the chakras, really. Chakras and gates are things I talk about pretty often. And so planets are associated with gates. And so for me, it was do you need to delve into this 4323 and your 43s in Saturn? Wouldn't it be helpful to know how to physically connect with Saturn to better delve into your gate? I have I have a client a few years ago now who moved. We talked about it. he moved to his Saturn line for his Saturn return. It was in a fairly significant gate that showed up a few times in his chart.
Gosh.
And it's been interesting though for him, because it's like coming into our masculine, to finding a foundation within our life, to going through that was super positive for him, versus my own internal bias to be like, never. So for me, it's
right. Cause I'm like, why would I would never recommend
like,
at
no,
all.
No. So for him, that was a really beautiful experience, versus say for some, a woman wanting to connect in with maybe her Venus line, just because that's a fairly feminine energy. Or as I spoke to someone who's in the queer community, and they offered that's bottom energy versus top energy. I was like, okay. I am expanding my knowledge. I accept. I am definitely not well versed. So
my Venus line is near, I think, Arizona, like Las Vegas, I think. And I love Las Vegas. That's probably why.
And it's receiving, right? And if you think about Venus as receiving and it's about money, I bet you do. Maybe you do okay. Yeah.
I always win money when I'm in Vegas.
Yeah. So that would be like a positive line, and anyone can access that. But let's say your Venus was placed fairly predominantly in your chart in a positive position, and you wanted to more deeply connect with your human design, like growth and experiment. How nice is it? And just to me, that's how I learned, to have a physical spot on the earth.
Right.
Or those other tools we talked about to tap into it when you deepen into your experiment. And then we'll have to talk about this another time, but then also the identity center, which you and I talked about, and all the planets and those expressions. But that's another
conversation. So I guess you would say that when people are thinking about astrocartography and as well as human design, because I know when we have our conversations, because I'm a projector, some of the things that I'm looking for or wanting might not be good for me based off of my regular human design energetics, because I might not have the energy, etc. So would you say it's more important to not necessarily worry about the line, but more about have clarity on what you want to get out of the experience in that new location?
Yeah. So I would say this reminds me of how our conversations go, where I say it's heart led and sometimes you want it to be mind led.
Right. I'm just like, I want to go on.
That feels very
do
mental.
It. Yes.
Yeah. So yes, but that's very mental. I would say, it could be healthy. My inclination, and this is just how my life goes, is where does my intuition lead me? And then I'll go look to see what's happening there. And then sort of reverse engineer, like, oh, well, why might that be supportive for me? And sort of trusting it, right? And I've traveled, I got into a Yukon SUV in San Diego because my intuition told me to drive to New Mexico. So like, I'm the extreme version of like, wherever spirit tells me, if that feels like in alignment, I'm going. And then I looked at the lines that I would interact with along the way.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So when you think about all of the work that you've done over these years, went from corporate HR and recruiting and all of that stuff into where you are now, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, it makes me emotional.
Well, get the tear.
I have an open emotional center. I mean, the very simple thing is don't worry so much and enjoy it all a little bit more. I just always really wanted the answer. And I think I missed a few things that I could have enjoyed a bit more.
Okay, I love that. So for those listening who are in places that they might not be enjoying so much, would that be some sound advice for them if they're on certain lines or certain placements where they're just not, where things are just passing them by? What advice would you give them with that?
I would say make sure you get the lesson when you're there, because the lesson will follow you.
Oh, shit. Who wants to bring that to your Venus or your Jupiter line or your sun line? Jeez.
And the way that I was able, I feel like, to energetically transition out of corporate was I found a way to enjoy it. Meaning, like, versus thinking it was all hard and coming at me, it was like, what am I teaching? How can I let go? Where can I bring my desires and gifts? How can I be more of myself? What can I do in service of others, in support of? My salary increased by more than $50,000 in that time frame. My performance, I got promoted. All this crazy stuff happened when I stopped trying to fix it and started being more of myself, letting the lessons come in, allow my true essence to flow and people to see me, and everything changed. So by the time I left, it was like leaving a 14-year relationship in love versus burn that thing down. I hate it. And love will say, like, there's nothing else, no matter what happens. And I had a really amazing job, an amazing team. This is not going to satisfy, but I know that. And I leave this from love. And that to me made the biggest difference. And then being able to step into the next thing and leaving that energy behind. And then, phasing out all those lessons of like just recovering from 14 years in corporate took a while. But that's, for me, was the biggest shift in my perspective, because I couldn't change the environment, but I could change my perspective.
I love that. And the reason why I love that is because we do look at things so like things are happening to us, especially when we talk about energies that sometimes we can't necessarily change right away, which is where you live. And so that's why I wanted to touch on that. And how can you enjoy it? How can you change your perspective when you might be on your Chiron line or something and you just can't move right now? So what do you do? So I think that's some really, really great advice. My next question for you is, and this is just questions that I love asking. If you had a choice, you can only pick one. Would you do the last 5 years over or jump to the next 5 years?
I mean, you're asking an optimistic Sagittarius.
Only one. You can only pick one, and why?
I mean, I will say the next 5 years, because I intrinsically believe in my own physical being that they are going to be amazing, like beyond my wildest dreams, amazing. And I deeply appreciate what I've experienced, but those feel very foundational to the next 5, which are going to be, I think, pretty spectacular.
That's awesome. Okay. Only many people choose that. Some people have chosen the last 5 years. And I was just like, will you do it over?
I mean, it's nice to know what will happen in theory.
Right.
But I am a forward motion kind of gal, and I trust that it only gets better. So that's where I choose.
Okay. So with that forward motion thinking, what are some other things that you're going to be doing out, with all the things that you do? Like what's lighting you up right now that people can expect to hear from, or when they follow you and all of that stuff, because everybody's going to be coming to you for astrocartography. So what else is there?
So I love astrocartography, but the underlying theme of everything I do is I think it's inviting people back into their own sovereignty. That's the same thing that tool did for me. So while I love human design and I love astrocartography, I mean, I love a tool in general. It's the invitation back to you to find your own personal truth and then be able to move through the world from there. And so I think what I feel called to build upon on all these skills I've grown is more of the energetics piece. So I think next year I'm going to be releasing a program around the energetics of entrepreneurship. So I think we can mentally.
I love that.
Oh, good. That's always a good sign. We can mentally know what to do, but my experience has always been it was the block in my body, not the knowledge that stopped me from my next stage of growth. And I really love the work I do there. So energetic pods is how I think I'm going to bring people together. So you have some community, but small enough experiences that you get to interact. I'm going to release an energetics of human design chakras, because it kind of ties into the way I experience it, which I'm excited about. And then I don't know yet. We still got to go talk to the people upstairs and chat to them some more. But I think the quickest thing that's available is the energetics of astrocartography full course. And then I'm going to sell individual planetary experiences so that you can choose
awesome
which ones you want to start interacting with, that come with an ebook, a personal workbook for your own energetics, and then some guided meditations and maybe a few other goodies in there to kind of get into that integration and start with maybe one planet if that feels good, and then maybe you want to go into the whole course eventually. But a fun place to start that's really digestible no matter your knowledge.
That's awesome. So I would suppose and guess that what people can do if they can't physically visit, move to these locations and all of that, is just learn how to, through some stuff that you'll be offering, is how to embody these planets, because they actually kind of help. Like for me, Venus is for me in my second house, and my second house is ruled by Capricorn. I have my little biases about Capricorn. However, it rings true. And when I tap into Venus things are amazing. So for those listening, you know, Erin's really amazing at this. And it will really help you. I will say this: be very clear about what you want, because just from our talks, TMI, not telling them my business, but I thought I wanted certain things for places, you know, that we've talked about, and they just don't feel right anymore. And so that changes. So, you know, just be careful with that. So my last question to you is, what do you believe is your superpower?
I mean, what it says to me is seeing the truth within people and seeing their highest expression that's possible.
I love that.
I didn't even know the answer till you asked. Great. Thank you. Thanks for getting me in response. Always appreciated.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope we answered some basics about astrocartography, and everyone go follow Erin. I'll put all of her information in the show notes. Make sure you like the video. If you're watching, make sure you rate the podcast and all of that. And thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. We could do this. I could do this all day with you, but thank you so much for connecting today.
You're welcome.